So last night, someone asked about refuge, and what's the importance of refuge, what's the importance of lineage, and so on, and we started to discuss that. But this is a clearer way to describe the understanding of why refuge is important, why lineage is important, and so forth, from a Dharma perspective. I say from a Dharma perspective because there are many scholars in the world today who teach Kashmir Shaivism or non-dual Shaivism, Tibetan Vajrayana, Tibetan Bun, Dzogchen, and so forth, all these lineage-based traditions, Taoism, Daojia, and they have every right to do this. This is a scholastic, academic thing to teach. It's a subject. But when it comes to the practitioners who are practicing this methodology inside of this view, right, who want to achieve spiritual realization and so forth, this is not an academic topic. This is a live tradition to us. And I want to make that distinction. So there are some scholars like Alexis Sanderson, the best non-dual Shaiva scholar in the world, hands down, no one comes close. Everybody learned from him. He doesn't teach it as a tradition. He doesn't practice it, he doesn't teach it, he respects it for what it is. He teaches it as an academic subject, and I really respect that. There are other scholars who have not had a guru-disciple relationship, have not had any kind of training. This is really important, right? They haven't had actual training. And you can't attend a workshop or two and call that training with a guru or a lama, right? In the lineage sense, it doesn't work. We're talking minimum 10, 12 years of very strong work, at the very least. So there are scholars who know their subject. These other traditions I just named, all the traditions of non-dual yoga meditation, but they haven't done the work. And they haven't had proper guru-disciple relationship. Therefore, that cannot be lineage, obviously. If they're teaching, that's broken lineage, right? It's just academic. The problem is some of those scholars, unlike Alexis Sanderson, say that they're teaching a spiritual tradition and give students instructions in the spiritual tradition. They go so far as to give initiations into the sacred mantras of that tradition, which they themselves never received. They themselves never practiced. Right? We call that a break. That's broken. In fact, not even broken. It never even got transmitted at all to the person. They did it all on their own. They feel inspired. They feel they have fate to do this. It's even been stated by one scholar recently that anybody teaching Shaivism he was referring to, anybody teaching it now can be considered a lineage holder because you're just teaching without basically, there are no real lineage holders left, so anyone teaching it in any form is some kind of lineage holder, is teaching the tradition, and I disagree. On a few levels, we disagree. So there are other scholars who are scholars, definite scholars, who did good scholarly work and still do some good scholarly work, some of them, who have had initiation with a guru, who have a disciple relationship to a guru, who have received instruction over 10, 20 years, and who also teach now. Now those people are doubly blessed, right? They have scriptural tradition that they studied in school, they also have the blessings of their guru and so forth. So if, and I'm going to say if, because I don't know these people's authorizations, if they had the full authorization from their guru to go out and be an acharya, then that's really a good situation. So we have quite a spectrum of people teaching. Who can give refuge? Okay. Refuge can only be given by somebody who has been initiated by a guru. That guru can be a woman or a man, a lama or a guru. And after taking that initiation, they have trained underneath that person, and you'll never see it happening in less than 10 or 12 years that they're given permission to teach. And the guru or lama has said, you are now authorized to teach as an acharya. That's the word in Sanskrit. Now that word acharya means you've gone through all the training you need to do. And you're consecrated by the teacher, you've been examined by the teacher or teachers in that lineage, and you can teach. In Tibetan, they will call a geshe degree or kempo degree. These are degree names that a person will achieve by doing 12, usually 12 plus years underneath the lopan or the panla, the great teacher of that monastery. And may have studied with many other teachers as well, of course, in that program. So This is what we're talking about to keep transmission lineage alive. What is the transmission of the lineage? It is very much the live freshness of the realized state that is passed through the succession of masters into the future, that is supported by practice, that is even further out supported by text and the spiritual culture of that tradition. But the key thing is live lineage transmission from guru to disciple in unbroken succession, where each new disciple has achieved the minimum standard needed to go out and teach. Okay, that's really important. That is a person that you are encouraged to take refuge with. Taking refuge in what? You're taking refuge in the teachings. Taking refuge in the flow of realization from those masters who represent those teachings through time. You're taking refuge in the root lama, root guru of that tradition, whose presence is still felt to this moment when you're sitting with the teacher who represents those teachings. Right? It's still live. This is live, you see, unbroken. You're taking refuge in the ultimate essence, which you have different names for in different traditions, right? Shiva, Shakti, Kuntun Sampo, Samantabhadra, these kind of names, the Tao. You just take refuge in all of these things. Also, you're taking refuge in the scriptures, in the stupas and temples, and all this thing comes together. So refuge is quite something. This is all in relation to stage 5. We were discussing the 12 stages and how each stage shows the Vajradeha, the practice of the immortal body, immortal spirit, immortal mind, through Kundalini Hatha Yoga. And we got up to stage 5 and said, okay, at this stage, you've done a lot of work on yourself, psychologically, spiritually, and now you're ready for a real guru, a real tradition. Because the 12-stage view of our school comes from our tradition. Our tradition is a guru-disciple succession of unbroken transmission, so therefore, in stage 5, it's time to have that connection. It could have come earlier, like we said, but in stage 5, at the very least, now it's very necessary. Very necessary. So then it becomes important for us to know what is a qualified guru, lama, acharya. I prefer the term acharya over guru. Guru is too highly loaded now, and too many Indian type of gurus have broken off, and after they achieve their graduation or not, from some teacher or not, they develop their own kind of guru cult, where the whole thing is about them instead of the teachings, instead of the practices. It's really important that the transmissions of the teachings and the practices and the Shakti is unbroken. The energy of transmission is unbroken. The live freshness of realization is unbroken. That's what enlivens those teachings and practices and the teachers, right? So I don't even want to use the word guru because it's too much about these outliers who spin off and do their own thing and they don't have any lineage after them, basically. So I'm talking about real acharyas, real lamas, okay? Now, in the way of understanding this graphic will make it easier for you to understand. This is basically a timeline from source, base, before time and space. So all the great traditions that we just named earlier, they would say that the source or essence of their tradition comes from another dimension. That dimension has no time and space, so it really has no origin. But the teachings, when they enter into this universe, have an origin, have a time and space. And usually they come through the vehicle of one great teacher. One great teacher receives that download, and then this thing gets transmitted. And that's happening here to here. So here's the source, right? This ineffable, mysterious source. So that mysterious, ineffable source, base, everything before time and space is down here. And that root guru of the lineage where that person manifested as a perfected being, it's usually said. They have some kind of miraculous birth. This is the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya coming together as Nirmanakaya and coming into this world to bring the teachings here. That's the usual mythological way that this kind of thing is described. They become the root guru, basically. Now, there's always a root guru. There usually is a person in real time and space. Now, history was difficult back then, but we're not recorded so detailed. But definitely we can say that there were real root gurus at the base of most of these lineages, right? Now, what happens is this diagram will show you, after the guru, these little squares represent realized lineage teachers. That is, teachers who are from stage 7 to stage 10 in their development. 7 to 10. Those are the squares. This is just random, because it's kind of how it happens. The little dots are not fully realized teachers. Somewhere between 2 and 6. It'd be rare that a teacher would be made a teacher in stage 2, 3, or 4, but sometimes there's instructors under instructors under instructors. You handle the kids, this stage 3 person will handle the teenagers, and the stage 4 or 5 teacher will handle the adults. This kind of thing happens. So it's okay. So it sometimes happens. So we can see that usually after the guru, though, this is historically accurate, you get realized teacher teaches realized teacher, student who becomes realized teacher teaches student who becomes realized teacher. And usually in the beginning it's unbroken like this. For example, in the Bumpo Dzogchen, you get like 33 generations of light body masters before it starts getting a little broken down. The transmission is still there, it's still live and fresh, but not everybody's getting a rainbow body generation after generation, right? So this is part mythology and part truth, right? So just to show that, I put a lot of squares in the beginning, and then to show you that there could be not fully realized teachers holding a lineage. You say, how can that be? It's a lineage of fresh realization. How could it be? Well, ideally we have a realized master at every generation, but sometimes there isn't a very highly realized master for 1, 2, 3 generations. And then one comes, boom, really big, and revitalizes the whole thing. So it's kept alive, funny enough, by the grace and humility of those non-realized teachers who know they're not realized, but they keep practicing in earnest, teaching to their highest ability, and then that one teacher, 2 generations, 4 generations, somewhere down the line comes as a student and has a very high level of aptitude, usually from previous life practice, and they actualize it and they become a great realized master again. The whole lineage is alive again in that sense. So there is some sense that it's always being transmitted, even if the person's not fully realized. That's why you need a tradition. That's why I believe, in our tradition, our system, all the ones I just named, that's why we have this tradition, to hold it together during the periods of time where not fully realized masters are teaching. If you don't, if you just have random scholars or random yoginis who say, I'm pretty realized, I'm going to start teaching and start my school. Yeah, I'm better than most people, so I'll do it. There's nothing holding that together, right? And we'll see this over here farther down the line. So this can happen. Now, there's also infusions that come into the lineage and things that come out along the way. And to understand this really fully, these are illustrated here. Let's call this one New Revelation. So this says New Revelation. So somewhere along the line, the masters are going along and boom, that realized master gets a new revelation that becomes part of the tradition now. It doesn't go against anything in the tradition from before, but it brings it up to another higher level. That's quite common, right? So, new revelation can come in. Now it's part of the stream. These are all like tributaries, you see? Another thing that can happen is that this tradition can absorb an authentic sect. Another authentic sect of a tradition that's parallel, similar, could be absorbed. That happens a few ways. In the old days, there would be a debate often. The master would be debated by another master from another sect. They would lose, and the rules were they would then have to join that other sect, right? That was the way it used to work there. Sometimes it's just that their sect is running down, there's not enough members to maintain the temples, that kind of thing, but it's another, let's say, sect of non-dual Shaivism, for example. You got 9 to 11 fully developed sects with their own texts, their own temples, and so on in the old days. As one of them's running down, they may say, this temple shouldn't go to waste, and it's close enough to this other school, let's say Prachabhignya or Sri Vijaya or something, so we're going to donate it, and our students will join your school, and that'll make it stronger. They had enough vision to not be like, we're going to go down with the ship, which would be a loss, wouldn't it? So the tradition survives, so they can absorb another authentic sect in that way. But then you see something funny over here. A dotted line with big person, medium person, small person, X, end of line. What's that? These are the one-off people that think, I've got a new revelation, but they usually don't. They think they do, and then they go off to the side. No, it's not fully realized, see, from this dot. And they go off from the side, and they start their own thing. And why I put 3 people every time I showed this example, here, here, and here. The Taoist teacher Lu Ming and I looked at over 100 different lineages that came to the United States from Japan, China, Nepal, Tibet, and India. And one from Indonesia. And we looked at them, and they all died after 3 generations, right? There's only 1 or 2 that kept going, but even though they're sort of going in a very secular kind of way now. It lost its power, and so on. So really, the ones we looked at, almost all died. There's only a few that kept going in the same power and glory. And that's usually what we see, and it's usually within 3 generations that it ends. So that one teacher who had some spark, tried their own thing, finds someone who's pretty acceptable as a successor, and then another one, and it's over. That's usually how it worked in America, and it worked like that in Europe, we noticed in other places too. So, staying with the mainstream and keep going through our thing, you see it happens again over here, end of the line. And there's many, many examples. Like I said, over 100 times this happened in the United States, and real traditions from these other countries I mentioned came and died. And they're going to continue to do that because you can't go out by yourself. It just doesn't work. You have to be part of a living tradition, right? And that's what happens. And I think those people that break away like this are also people that are full of their own ego. They're full of their own, oh, I had a realization. One realization, big deal. Realizations happen regularly for people who do sadhana for 30 years of their life. You know, this kind of thing. You felt one moment of grace, and I'm going to create a tradition. It just doesn't work because grace is happening all the time. There must be more criteria. And this is why the guru-disciple or lama-student tradition ensures that, right? Ensures that context, that rich context to hold that live spark. So then up here we get another possibility for coming in, a new revision of the tradition within the tradition. So this is also possible. This master here, Master Square, said, oh, I really had a new vision. It's all the same principles, it's all the same texts. We should go forward though like this. A little bit of an upgrade in some way. We can use an example of Yongdrung Bun, the tradition of Bun from Tibet, from Zhangzhung originally, then to Tibet. And Yongdrung Bun had an upgrade. Some would say an upgrade, some would say it's heretical, so it's debatable. But the tradition that came from this upgrade is still going, is very strong, and has the tradition that came from this upgrade is not called Bun, but Bun Sarma, meaning new Bun. And that is a very strong tradition happening. Now what happened in this upgrade? In this upgrade, the Bun practitioners from Yongdrung Bun, means original or eternal Bun, said, you know, we really feel something for this Padmasambhava character and some of the other elements of Vajrayana, and we'd like to merge them into our Bun spinal cord and put on some muscles of Vajrayana and some things like that. So that's what they did. So it's a fused system, and it functions really well, right? So it's continuing. Okay. Now you go up a little higher and you see another failed experiment. And then there's another one you see here, editing and refining. So also, some people along the way can edit and refine the system. It can be too big and has to be taken down. Like when the Muslims invaded Kashmir in northern India, the whole temple complex system, which actually went all the way through southern China, all the way through Malaysia, Indonesia, right? Massive temple complex, one tradition of Shaivism through it all, okay? It got nailed when the Muslims came in. And temples were razed, hospitals were razed, libraries were razed, meaning burnt down, destroyed. So it was impossible to maintain such a massive tradition of texts, ceremonies, sacred dances, royal patronage, you know, this whole thing collapsed. And that's how our tradition got started, because of that, everybody ran for the hills. The yogis ran for the hills, and they kept everything that they knew from practice in their minds and their hearts, and they kept going deep into the practice side. And then the scriptures, a few survived. Right? Now we're translating many, many more. But this is how it happened. So that is another type of editing that occurred due to diaspora, due to invasion. But there can be an editing that occurs without even diaspora, without even having invasion. Okay? Another example of this would be Bodhidharma, came from India. He was a tantrika, powerful tantrika, probably a Shaivist, and then became a Buddhist. And he was a martial artist. And he went all the way up into China, Honan, right? And he started, he arrived at Shaolin Temple. Shaolin means like small forest. And he went in there and he noticed, oh, these people can't meditate very well. So he offered his services and they said, we don't want to know about it. They also had their own kung fu, which is kind of crappy at the time too. So he went up on a mountain and meditated for 7 years facing a cliff. And one day, one of the students from down there hiked up the mountain to check on him. And he didn't move for 7 years and his image got formed in the cliff face. So they thought, okay, maybe he's a siddhas, we should learn from him. So they brought him back down and then he established the Shaolin Buddhist tradition, which became Chan Buddhism. Chan Buddhism, which then became, after 7 generations, it went to Japan, became Zen Buddhism, right? So that was him saying, these Chinese folks, they're never going to get this whole Buddhist, tantric, Shaiva tantric thing I brought with me from India. Forget it. The language is different. They don't even recognize that I'm a siddha. We're going to start from scratch here. So what did he do? Really simple. Zen meditation, just non-conceptual meditation, a little bit of breathing, and then a whole bunch of martial art practice and yoga for the body. That was it. So he kept it real simple. Martial artists liked it. It's very simple. And they were achieving stage 7, 8, 9, 10. So hey, not bad, right? That's an edit in a good way that needed to keep that tradition going, right? And actually made a whole new tradition in a certain sense. So that's the Dharma transmission into the future. I have a few points here to go over again in a way of summary, in a way of this, saying that number 1, actual transmission or realization, not conceptual. So lineage and refuge should occur within an actual transmission lineage, transmission of the realized state, not a conceptual understanding of it. So when you go to take refuge, I mean here especially, I'm talking about the one-offs and especially the self-made gurus, self-made lamas, and self-made scholar gurus. Okay, they're problematic because they don't have this, and I'll tell you why. It's coming up. It's not just judgment, I'm telling you really pragmatically why they're a problem. Number 2 is, when you take refuge, you're taking refuge in the mandala of what? Protection, liberation, and after death realization, right? Now, what does that mean? When you take refuge in the mandala of protection, it means that there are many protective qualities that go along with this transmission, that flow along with it. There are deities associated with it that protect the lineage teachings, that protect you as well. The succession of masters, instead of seeing them way back in the past, our tradition sees them as right here, right now, present in the teacher that I'm with. Right there, all of them. So there's a great protective power within these traditions. And you'll notice when you're within those traditions, there is this great protective power. People are helped, in this way. The other thing is that when you take refuge in the mandala, there's liberation, okay? Now, you're taking refuge in liberation. What does that mean? It means that liberation has been established as a fact with internal, external signs and a way to get to that liberation. And that has been passed down for hundreds of generations sometimes, right? And knowing that, it means I take refuge in the real understanding of liberation and the real practice of getting it. So I'm not going to take a risk with something else, quite risky, right? And here's the most important for this. The after-death realization or transiting the after-death states. I want you to imagine the local inspired yoga teacher who says, I'm good as any guru now, I'm going to start my own thing, and even if my own thing is like an anti-guru thing, but I'll start it, so it'll be the guru of the anti-guru thing, and they'll start it and they'll get this thing going. Okay. What is that person going to do for someone who takes refuge with them, taking initiation, doing these practices? Even some of these scholars say, oh, but I'm not really a guru, but you're giving initiation in the mantras. You're giving an initiation, I don't know into what, but they're giving some kind of ceremonial initiation. You're telling them that this is a path that can take them to enlightenment. So you're feeding them a lot of stuff which is baloney because you're not enlightened. So how do you know? Because you have never had a guru and had a path. What happens to that person at the end of their life? That naive, trusting person. Oh, well, that scholar seems so amazing. They wrote all these books, they lecture at universities around the world, or that yogi down the block, that yogini, she's so amazing. Wow, she has so much Shakti, and she dances like a rhythmic snake. I think she has Shakti, She seems so nice, What happens when that person goes to die? When that person goes to die, they have no lineage. They have no one greeting them in the after-death state. They have no realized masters waiting for them. They have no master who knows what the death state is and beyond the death state and has come back to tell you about it with the teachings and take you through that themselves. So that is a major problem with those broken traditions or non-based in source traditions. Now they're called traditions, right? But they're not even a tradition really. That's a big problem. And that's why I think it's so sad to sell that kind of thing to people. It's disingenuous, it's a downright lie. And the person themselves hasn't even thought about their own death. When someone's teaching and they're not lineage empowered, they haven't thought about even their own death. That shows that they're really stage 5 or below. Because when you have the wisdom to understand your own death, you would never go out, ever, and deceive people, knowingly deceive them, to tell them you can take them through liberation. Or that just by giving these teachings and practices, people can go to liberation. That just simply wouldn't be something that occurs to you. It wouldn't be something that happens at all. You follow? So, that's the last reason on number 2 and why we really should be within a lineage to take refuge and to get proper instructions in the teachings, because when you go to die, then you'll be happy you did. You know? Could someone please? Thank you. Quickly. And the last moment here, number 3, is we have tested and transmitted for multiple generations. I think that's something powerful. A lot of people say, oh, that doesn't matter. If I found a new school that gives liberation that started yesterday, I would join it. Well, I would too, if that teacher was demonstrating a rainbow body, right? But we don't know. A new school starting with somebody, you don't know what the level is going to be of that school. When you know something's been around for many generations, you know, the Norwegian school I come from, over 30 generations. The Chinese school I come from, I'm the 35th generation, right? The Shiva school, it's like hundreds. The Bumpo Dzogchen school, hundreds. So I know I'm like deeply embedded in a massive line of lineage transmission that's been tested and transmitted for multiple generations, maybe multiple millennia actually, I think personally, and that's historically pretty true too. So there's no risk following the path, and it won't result in a loss, you know, right? Yes, of course, these great lineages have had bozos now and then, but not the main lineage head, right? And so it continues to flow along. So we have to be careful that just because someone says, oh, I have lineage, I have pedigree, doesn't mean that they're realized and doesn't mean that they're even a good person. This is important. They may not even be a good person. Oh my gosh, right? But you're a lot better off going with that lineage and even finding that your teacher might have been a bad egg in that lineage and then just stepping around them to another person in the lineage who is also authorized acharya. And then you're still in the same flow. You still have all the same protections. No wasted time. Zongzar Rinpoche said something really interesting about bad egg teachers. He said, if you were to look into the history of Buddhism and you were to see just how many bad egg teachers there were, if the bad egg teachers ruined the system, you'd really have no more Buddhism. That's how many there were. And he chuckles and says, you know, that's just how it is. So despite people's human imperfections, luckily, the Dharma is transhuman as well as expressed through humanity. That means that it survives even when it's flawed, as long as it's got tradition, as long as it's got some context to hold it together. And yes, there are realized beings that pop up every so often and reinvigorate it, and we see that, right? So we don't want to take a risk. We don't want to spend 20 years with somebody that has an idea that they're realized, doesn't come from a tradition, no one's sure, and then you wasted your time, wasted your life, and then you go to die and you're like, what do I do now? You know, you revert back to your old religion of birth or something and you feel lost, and it's just a terrible situation. These are the reasons why lineage transmission is important and why taking refuge in a extant live lineage transmission is, in our tradition's way of looking at it, the only way to go, right? So the non-dual meditation yoga traditions of Shaivism, Shaktism, of Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, of Tibetan Yongjung Bön, the Bön Tantric tradition, and Dzogchen and Daojia. In these traditions, I highly recommend you only get transmission, you only take refuge with teachers who come with this kind of a background, right? The teacher should have realization, The teacher should have had initiation in the lineage. The teacher should have had full instructions in the lineage in an apprenticeship that lasted minimum 10 to 12 years, right? And they then should be out teaching in this way. There you go. That's what you need. That's what you should look for. Okay? That's the importance of refuge and living transmission.